My name is Elena. I've held pressure on a gunshot wound with a frying pan rag in Aleppo. I've coordinated an emergency convoy under mortar fire in Dara. I've performed surgery by flashlight beneath a collapsed aid station. And yet somehow, nothing shook me quite like receiving a wedding invitation. Not just any wedding, my sister Rachel's. Engraved in gold serif font. Sent to me in the middle of a war zone, while I was triaging the wounded, surrounded by screaming children and sand-choked winds. At first, I thought it was a joke. Or spam. But no. There it was. My name in cursive, tucked between an injury report and a logistics manifest. Daniel, my colleague, glanced over my shoulder and said with a dry laugh, "What's the RSVP for? An airstrike or a family ambush?" I didn't answer, because I knew. This wasn't an invitation. It was a warning, a power play, maybe both. My mother once told me during one of our final phone calls, "You're always in dangerous places because you don't belong anywhere peaceful." Now here they were, summoning me back to the very place that taught me how to bleed in silence. Back to white lilies, lemon polish, and champagne flutes raised in judgment. I didn't go back for them. I went back for the truth. And I didn't know until it was too late. I wasn't attending a wedding. I was walking straight into a reckoning. Have you ever walked into a room full of family and felt like a stranger in your own life? Tell me where you're watching from, and drop a comment if you've ever had to stand your ground when your past tried to rewrite your story. Subscribe for more stories about breaking silence, reclaiming power, and becoming your own damn home. Daniel stood beside me, silent. I could feel his eyes more than see them. When I didn't speak, he broke the tension with a dry chuckle. "So, what's the RSVP for? Airstrike or family disaster?" I didn't answer. My hands had moved before my mind did. Zooming into the email, scanning the guest list, the schedule, the dress code. All of it was surreal. In the middle of this scarred hellscape, my family had sent an invitation engraved in gold serif fonts. "You're always in dangerous places because you don't belong anywhere peaceful." My mother's voice echoed in my head. Our last call, spoken like prophecy. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a line drawn in silk and gold. One final offer, or maybe one final blow, and I couldn't tell which. The wind howled again, flinging grains of sand into the flap of the tent. I stood up, brushing my scarf from my face. Daniel crossed his arms, tilting his head at me. "They know where you are?" he asked, quieter now. "This ain't just a social call. I haven't spoken to Rachel in 2 years. But she invited you. That doesn't mean anything." Daniel frowned, then took the tablet back, setting it on the cot. "It means you're thinking about going." I didn't answer. Not directly. I sat, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding harder than it had during the last mortar shelling. He crouched in front of me, searching my face like I was one of the wounded. "You'll bleed more in Boston than you do here," he said. "You know that, right?" I tried to laugh. I'm used to blood. He didn't smile. He knew me too well. Later that night, when the stars came out over the broken horizon and the only light was the flickering bulbs from our backup generator, I lay on my cot staring at the ceiling. I thought about my sister's wedding, about what it meant to be invited, and what it meant to RSVP. Was it forgiveness? A test? Or just a setup for humiliation with an audience in gowns? By dawn, I had made up my mind. The airport in Damascus was barely operational, but my ID still carried weight with certain NGOs. I secured a flight. 3 stops, one overnight in Istanbul, another in Frankfurt. Nothing felt real. When Daniel helped me pack, he didn't ask questions. He just handed me my go bag and zipped it shut with finality. "I'm not going there for them," I said. "I'm going there for me." "Make sure you come back the same person," he murmured. I paused. I think I need to come back different." The drive to the airstrip was slow. Every bump on the road felt symbolic, like I was crossing more than just distance. The men at the checkpoint barely looked at me. Just another foreign face leaving something burning behind. I boarded the small plane as the sky turned orange behind the hangars. The sun filtered through sand in the air, painting everything in a wash of rust and farewell. My go bag rested by my feet. I had packed no makeup, no jewelry, no gifts. Just 2 sets of clothes, a med kit, and a single photograph. Me and Rachel at 16, arms around each other, grinning like we didn't know what was coming. The engines roared. The desert shrank beneath us. I thought I was attending a wedding. I didn't realize it would be a reckoning. Home smelled of white lilies and lemon furniture polish. And a subtle message. You don't belong here anymore. The air was too clean, too curated. The lawn out front had been freshly edged, each blade standing in attention. Hydrangeas bloomed in silent, perfect clusters. Every inch of the Brooks residence whispered of effort and control, of everything being just so. And yet, none of it felt like mine. When I stepped through the door, my mother didn't greet me with open arms. Instead, she paused mid-rearrangement of a flower arrangement and gave me a look I'd seen before, once on a stranger inspecting earthquake debris in Port-au-Prince. Elena, she said, letting the name hang in the air like static. You look resilient. I smiled thinly. Good to see you too, Mom. My father shuffled in from the hallway a moment later, offering a hug that barely brushed my shoulders. Long flight? He asked. 3 days, I replied. He nodded like he hadn't really heard. Behind him, a giant foam board displayed the wedding seating chart in calligraphy and metallic ink. My name, tucked in the corner at table 18, looked as if it had been added last minute. When you grow up and settle down, then we'll talk about you being a part of things. That had been the line years ago, said over coffee after I'd returned from my 3rd assignment abroad. I hadn't settled, so they hadn't talked. My childhood bedroom had been transformed. The books were gone, the posters stripped. In their place, shelves of toilet paper, holiday decor, and a broken Dyson vacuum. My suitcase barely fit in the hallway. Rachel found me in the kitchen later, her dress still tagged and draped over one arm. She looked beautiful. Sleek hair, glossy nails, perfectly contoured face. But when she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. Hey, she said, voice too chirpy. Glad you made it. I stared. You invited me. Well, yeah, but I didn't think you'd actually come. I wasn't sure if she meant that as a joke. She laughed awkwardly, then gestured to the island counter cluttered with champagne bottles and gourmet crackers. There's a rehearsal dinner tonight, she said. It's mostly just immediate family and the wedding party. Am I not immediate family? I asked. She blinked. Well, we had to make space for +1s. You know how it is. I nodded slowly. I didn't bring one. Oh, right. By the time I re-entered the living room, Linda had already moved on to assessing my wardrobe. You don't have anything softer? She asked, tugging lightly at my canvas jacket. I was thinking we could get you to the salon tomorrow morning. They can do wonders for that sun damage. I work in deserts, I said. Yes, well, now you're in a wedding. Let's soften the battlefield look. There was no fight in her voice, just quiet condescension, as if my face were an unmade bed. Later that evening, I stood near the edge of the pre-dinner gathering, a glass of flat champagne in hand. Conversations buzzed around me, none directed at me. The walls were lined with people I didn't know or didn't recognize. Extended relatives, acquaintances of the groom, suburban fixtures in pastel and pearls. Table 18 was in the farthest corner. I recognized no one seated there. Not even a distant cousin. Just names I didn't register and a man in orthopedic shoes talking to himself about crypto. When Victoria Hawthorne entered, the room hushed slightly. The mother of the groom moved like a woman who expected the air to part for her. Her diamonds caught the light, and her eyes, sharp and icy, landed on me within seconds. She approached without hesitation. So you're the war doctor. Elena, I offered, extending a hand. She took it briefly, then dropped it. How quaint. Rachel mentioned you'd be flying in from somewhere dusty. I didn't react. That seemed to unsettle her more than if I had. Rachel hovered nearby but didn't intervene. Her fiancé, Andrew, was across the room, deep in conversation with someone holding a decanter like it was a trophy. I scanned the room again, trying to place myself in the puzzle. The fit wasn't there. Not even close. If this was a stage, I was cast as the extra who didn't get a mic. I walked into the ballroom alone. People paused. Not in admiration, but like I'd walked in through the wrong door. The light hit me full in the face. It bounced off chandeliers dripping in gold leaf, refracted across polished marble floors and gilded picture frames. I had the unsettling sense of entering a museum exhibit where I was the misplaced artifact. My black dress was simple, high-necked, ankle-length. Practical. Wrong. A few heads turned, some lingered. The silence that followed me wasn't hostile, just sharp enough to slice skin. Daniel's voice echoed in my head. No one resents you more than the ones you remind of their own mediocrity. At the time, I'd thought he was being dramatic. Now, I wondered if he was understating it. A server, maybe 19 in earnest, approached me briskly. Staff enters through the service doors, ma'am. I blinked. I'm not staff. He squinted at my dress. Sorry. I walked past him without correcting further. The room was dressed to impress. Silver-trimmed centerpieces, monogrammed napkins folded like orchids. People glided across the floor in champagne satin and navy silk. I moved like a foreign element. Table 18 was nestled near a potted ficus, partially obscured from view. My name card sat crooked beside a water glass, the ink slightly smeared, my name spelled Elena. A toast rang out. One of the bridesmaids stood, already pink-cheeked from wine. To love, she called, and to anyone sitting alone, may they find someone to toast with soon. Laughter scattered across the room like confetti. I lifted my glass slowly, not out of participation, but as armor. Rachel had slipped into the crowd somewhere. I saw her lilac hem disappear behind a velvet curtain. At the center of it all stood Sabrina Hawthorne, the groom's younger sister. Sabrina wasn't classically beautiful. She was architected, every feature sharpened, every word rehearsed for maximum reach. Oh, look, Sabrina said loudly enough to summon a hush. We have a war hero in our midst. People turned toward me again. I kept my back straight. She's single, too, Sabrina added, waving her flute. We were thinking of auctioning her off later. For charity, of course. The joke landed. Not with thunder, but with a poisonous hiss of amusement. Another guest piped up from a nearby table. Do you treat PTSD with candles? Or is it more like chanting under the moon? Laughter again. My fingers clenched around the base of my glass. I scanned the room, not for rescue, just for confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind, that this was indeed happening. And there he was, Richard Hawthorne. He was tall, too put together to be unassuming, yet managed it. His suit was crisp, collar unbuttoned just enough to suggest comfort with formality. He hadn't laughed. He hadn't moved. He was just watching. His gaze didn't pierce. It considered. I turned away and focused on breathing. There was more. More jabs disguised as jokes. More passing mentions of being brave as if I were a zoo exhibit. More half-hearted congratulations for doing what I could in those places. At some point, I rose. I wasn't sure when the decision to leave became action, but my chair scraped quietly and I stood. And that's when it happened. Richard looked at me. Not the way the others did, with discomfort or performative interest. Just a subtle nod. Small. Intentional. His eyes met mine with a calm I hadn't known I needed. It wasn't pity. That nod wasn't pity. It was permission. And maybe recognition. I walked into the ballroom alone. People paused. Not in admiration, but like I'd walked in through the wrong door. The light hit me full in the face. It bounced off chandeliers dripping in gold leaf, refracted across polished marble floors and gilded picture frames. I had the unsettling sense of entering a museum exhibit where I was the misplaced artifact. My black dress was simple, high-necked, ankle length. Practical. Wrong. A few heads turned, some lingered. The silence that followed me wasn't hostile, just sharp enough to slice skin. Daniel's voice echoed in my head. No one resents you more than the ones you remind of their own mediocrity. At the time, I'd thought he was being dramatic. Now, I wondered if he was understating it. A server, maybe 19 and earnest, approached me briskly. "Staff enters through the service doors, ma'am." I blinked. "I'm not staff." He squinted at my dress. "Sorry." I walked past him without correcting further. The room was dressed to impress. Silver-trimmed centerpieces, monogrammed napkins folded like orchids. People glided across the floor in champagne satin and navy silk. I moved like a foreign element. Table 18 was nestled near a potted ficus, partially obscured from view. My name card sat crooked beside a water glass, the ink slightly smeared, my name spelled Elena. A toast rang out. One of the bridesmaids stood, already pink-cheeked from wine. "To love," she called. "And to anyone sitting alone, may they find someone to toast with soon." Laughter scattered across the room like confetti. I lifted my glass slowly, not out of participation, but as armor. Rachel had slipped into the crowd somewhere. I saw her lilac hem disappear behind a velvet curtain. At the center of it all stood Sabrina Hawthorne, the groom's younger sister. Sabrina wasn't classically beautiful. She was architected, every feature sharpened, every word rehearsed for maximum reach. "Oh, look," Sabrina said loudly enough to summon a hush. "We have a war hero in our midst." People turned toward me again. I kept my back straight. "She's single too," Sabrina added, waving her flute. "We were thinking of auctioning her off later. For charity, of course." He was tall, too put together to be unassuming, yet managed it. His suit was crisp, collar unbuttoned just enough to suggest comfort with formality. He hadn't laughed. He hadn't moved. He was just watching. His gaze didn't pierce. It considered. I turned away and focused on breathing. There was more. More jabs disguised as jokes, more passing mentions of being brave as if I were a zoo exhibit, more half-hearted congratulations for doing what I could in those places. At some point I rose. I wasn't sure when the decision to leave became action, but my chair scraped quietly, and I stood. And that's when it happened. Richard looked at me. Not the way the others did, with discomfort or performative interest. Just a subtle nod. Small. Intentional. His eyes met mine with a calm I hadn't known I needed. It wasn't pity. That nod wasn't pity. It was permission. And maybe recognition. He didn't ask for my name. He asked, "Were you the one who pulled out the convoy in Dara?" The air on the garden terrace was cooler, scented faintly with lavender and champagne. I hadn't expected anyone to follow me out. Not after what happened inside. But Richard stood there, calm, watching. "That convoy." "3 trucks, no escort," I said slowly. "It wasn't supposed to make it." "My nephew was in the second one," he replied. "Benjamin." The name jolted me. I remembered his face, pale, injured, clutching a photo of his wife. "He made it?" "He's alive, because of you." I nodded slightly. Praise always felt heavier than the work itself. We stood in silence until another voice joined us. "Elena?" Dr. Michael Chen stepped onto the terrace, smiling in recognition. "Didn't expect to see you here?" "Likewise," I replied, genuinely relieved. Michael turned to Richard. "You two met?" "She saved my nephew," Richard said before I could answer. Michael smirked. "She's been saving people a long time." I glanced toward the ballroom. Through the glass doors, Rachel stood frozen mid-laugh, watching. Her gaze flicked between Richard and Michael, then to me. Her confusion was palpable. For once, the narrative wasn't hers to control. Richard's voice softened. You did something no one else could. It's time someone stood up for you. I didn't answer, but something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just the sense that maybe I wasn't completely alone. Inside, a microphone popped. The man who hadn't said a word all night now had the mic in his hand. Silence fell before he even spoke. That's the kind of man Richard Hawthorne was. He stood near the head table, one hand resting calmly on the mic stand, the other tucked neatly in his jacket pocket. The spotlight hadn't been meant for him. It had been preset for Rachel, who now sat frozen, her champagne flute trembling slightly. I was still near the edge of the room, half hidden by a floral arrangement taller than I was. My instinct was to shrink further, but the silence kept me still. Even the clinking forks had stopped. Richard cleared his throat softly. Good evening. A few guests murmured, confused but respectful. They expected a toast to the groom, perhaps a story about childhood hijinks or sailing trips. No one expected war. I'm not the kind of man who interrupts moments like these, he began. But sometimes silence carries injustice, and sometimes silence must be broken not for drama, but for dignity. He paused, letting his words settle. I want to tell you a story, he said, about a convoy in Dara, 3 trucks, no military escort, just one woman coordinating rescue for dozens of strangers in a war zone. I felt my stomach tighten, my breath shallow. That woman got them out, alive, including a young man named Benjamin Hawthorne, my nephew. A few heads turned. Sabrina looked puzzled. Rachel went pale. I didn't know who she was, not at first. Richard continued. She never came asking for recognition. She never called in favors. She vanished back into the chaos. He scanned the room. Until tonight. Gasps spread like wildfire. Some guests looked around, trying to spot the heroine. Others squinted toward me, unsure no one asked why I came alone anymore. They just asked for my card. The room had shifted. Earlier, I'd been an afterthought, assigned a seat like luggage misrouted. But now, people leaned in when I spoke. Not out of politeness, but genuine attention. Faces I didn't recognize smiled like old friends, hands extended, voices murmuring words like, incredible, honored, hero. I stood on the manor balcony, the evening breeze cool against my bare arms. The moon lit the vineyard beyond the estate, where symmetrical rows of grapevines stretched like history. Precise, proud, cultivated. My drink was untouched. Not because I was nervous anymore, but because I didn't need anything to steady my hand. Rachel found me there. She didn't approach with the perkiness she'd worn like perfume all evening. This was different. Her heels clicked slowly. Her eyes, usually glassy with curated joy, were rimmed red. I didn't know, she said softly, stopping just short of me. I didn't turn. You never asked. She exhaled. I never thought to. I finally faced her. Her voice cracked. I was so busy being the center, I didn't realize what was holding the whole thing together wasn't me. It was you. And I let them treat you like you didn't matter. I didn't want to twist the knife. That wasn't who I was anymore. You didn't have to know, Rachel, I said. You just had to care. She nodded slowly, tears streaking her makeup. Is it too late? No, I said. But it's not for me to fix. She stepped back, shoulders hunched. I let her go. Inside, Dr. Chen found me. His warm, understated presence a welcome balm. Geneva, he said simply, UNHCR wants to hear you speak. I raised an eyebrow. No press, no glitter, just people who listen. He handed me a slim envelope. I accepted it. Later, Richard approached. He didn't say a word, just gave me his card. No flourish, no pitch. Just a nod that said, you know where to find me. I nodded back. Victoria, seated and quiet, didn't meet my eyes. She shrank, as if afraid I might address her directly. I didn't. Her silence was enough. A week passed. I didn't think about the wedding again until my phone rang. Hey, Rachel's voice came through. I'm at Logan, heading to Jordan. There's a clinic opening. I figured maybe I could learn. I didn't speak. I smiled. All right, she said quickly. Or not, just thank you for everything. Safe flight, I said. She hung up, and that was it. As I walked away from the manor that night, I wasn't leaving as the outcast. I wasn't seeking approval or waiting for an invitation. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to keep walking. She arrived alone, dismissed as an afterthought. But truth has a way of commanding attention once it's finally given a voice. In exposing the quiet cruelty of those who once silenced her, Elena didn't just reclaim a seat. She dismantled the entire table. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Because sometimes, all it takes to break generations of arrogance is one woman who refuses to bow.